Deputy Speaker. In preparing to speak on this bill, I thought, can I remember my student numbers from my time at Curtin University and the University of Western Australia? And for those who are paying very close attention to this debate in the vocational and further education community, I will say that my Curtin student identifier started with 1262. I understand they're the only numbers you need to date when I was at that particular institution. And my University of Western Australia numbers, I'm happy to give it to you personally, Member for Tangney. And my UWA number started with 2044. These numbers do stick with you for life, as this legislation intends. And I mean, while Labor supports the intention of this legislation to have a unique student identifier, hopefully removing duplication across many parts of government and also providing for more longitudinal data that allows us to analyse the sorts of journeys and where students might be successful in their vocational training, where they might have had problems. It might also tell us things about where our system is not working. So in that sense, it's going to be a real improvement. But it's not transformative. It's not going to be something that they hear in Finland and go, "Oh my God, Australia's got the best education system in the world. We've got to get that number thing." It's simply going to allow other entities, employers, employment agencies, licensing bodies to access a student's transcripts, and of course have a civil penalties regime so that when people do fraudulently access, alter or produce a transcript, there is a proper penalty for that, as there should be. I think for anyone who's worked really hard to get a vet qualification, you meet those people and they are proud of what they've achieved, and the idea that some people might falsify their records, and at times think about the sorts of things where people might have these qualifications, be they electricians, plumbers, mechanics. Falsifying those records can actually lead to huge safety implications. So providing an appropriate civil penalties regime is a really important step to take. Of course, some students might need an exemption, and this legislation appropriately provides for that exemption. I think, again, you can imagine that some people who may be facing particular personal circumstances where their ability to be identified or tracked would put their personal safety at risk. I'm pleased that this legislation recognises their needs as well. But I do worry about whenever a government is building a new system, particularly this government, that the threat of privatisation might be just around the corner. This is going to be incredibly valuable data that the government is collecting, that the government is compiling, and while, from my understanding, it will be accessed free of charge, there's always a temptation, as we've seen with ASIC databases and other things, to start to add a little fee, becoming a big fee, onto these sorts of databases, and indeed, in time, possibly even privatising them. You think about those government databases where things haven't been quite managed, and one of the obvious challenges we face on a regular basis is the challenges with the Centrelink and Social Security databases and mainframes. They still call them mainframes. I don't think that's because they're talking about that's the modern technical lingo. I think it's because we are talking about a 1980s mainframe system that is sitting somewhere deep underneath our Centrelink system. So I at least hope that the student identifiers process will be built on something slightly more modern. I think about digital systems like CapTel, which has obviously been an item of debate in this place in recent months, a service that the government funded, a private service, privately provided by a business provider from the United States, but a system that the government has, through a government decision, switched off. And again, where you build systems and people build businesses, and indeed I was speaking out a vet who relies on CapTel to help people with their pets in terms of emergencies. And when you switch off a service, all of a sudden you have these huge challenges of disruption in business, disruption in people's personal life, and this, to me, I just see that there is a risk that that would happen. We know that this government closed Smart Traveller in November 2019, a database that ensured that people could register their travel with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, making sure that they could lodge their travel and that the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade would be able to easily contact them. Again, a government service that was switched off. And I just need to say the words "my health record" to know that there is huge distrust amongst many about the sorts of data that the government retains on people. when you think about the positives, though, of what this legislation could achieve in expanding unique student identifiers, I think one of the other areas that it's obvious that we should move to over time is to include this in our early childhood system. I'm a strong believer that our early childhood system is part of our education system. It's not just a service so that people can get their kids somewhere while they go to work. It's actually about those very little people having an education experience, and we invest as a nation a large amount of money in that education. The government invests a large part, parents invest a large part. Wouldn't it be great if we had a unique student identifier to track that part of their journey as well, so that in 20, 30, 40 years' time, we can actually have a look and say, this student went here for their early childhood education, they went to these primary and secondary schools, here is their VET outcome, and as we continue to move to lifelong learning, see even more of that education journey, and then make sure that we're investing in the right places. It is amazing the data that we don't have in this place, in the legislation that we pass, where we have relied on the good people of Treasury and other departments to guesstimate what things might be, but when by simply expanding something like this student identifier to young people, you could have even more data about where their success and failure lies. Equally, those sort of analytics would allow us to look at where there are underperforming vocational education training providers. I don't think anyone in this place today could say that every VET provider in Australia is a high-quality provider that deserves to have government support. And definitely having more data about where students fail, where students don't actually make the transition from enrolling to graduating or completing that certificate course, it would allow us to know where those failures are, not just on the basis of quality review, but looking at where students jump around, because we know that students, as discerning consumers, looking for good quality education wherever they can find it, will look to go from one provider to another if they're not happy with the service. This will give us that data, and that's a good thing, and I commend the government for that. In my electorate of Perth, proud to have 4 TAFE campuses. Leederville, with some approximate 3,010 students enrolled. Mount Lawley, with approximate 1,356 students. It's early in the year, so these numbers will fluctuate somewhat. The Northbridge campus, known as Perth campus, the biggest campus, but 8,979 enrolments. East Perth, 1,221 enrolments. All fabulous TAFE providers that bring in people from, as far away, if they're the great electorate of Moore or Tangney, particularly if they're keen on fashion design. There's a fabulous fashion design school at the Northbridge TAFE campus, which I've been pleased to visit a number of times, and they've worked on Australian productions, Australian films, Australian dramas, and indeed just ordinary Australian TV. It's a fabulous campus, and I'm very proud of each and every one of those TAFE campuses in my electorate of Perth. There is a few risks for those students, all those 14,566 students who are about to get this unique student identifier that, as the member for Curtin said, stays with you for life. Now, I've never been brave enough to get a tattoo. I don't know I could make that sort of a life commitment, but this student identifier is going to stick with you for life, and there are some risks in that. Not everyone has a nice linear path through the education system. Some people do enrol, fail, go and do other things, and then come back again. And so there's a risk that this doesn't give people that fresh start that they might need. And so I just encourage the government to think, as they actually implement this, how do you make sure that they do indeed deliver on their promise of if you have a go, you get a go? Because the reality is that under this proposal, if you have a go, you get a record. And most of the time that's a great thing, because it allows verification, it allows for people to have very clear data and proof of what they did. But sometimes it means that someone might be less willing to show their qualifications, might be worried or embarrassed, even though, as many will know, you don't really care about whether someone failed something 20 years ago, but that's not always how people will see that themselves. So it's important that we ensure that students don't face disadvantage when applying for jobs, and they don't face any sort of unfair discrimination for challenges, setbacks, failures, or just even enrolling in a silly unit that they should never have enrolled in the first place. I mean, myself, I enrolled in a film degree, which is probably why I have a little bit of affection for the film production and design students at North Metro TAFE. I didn't finish that film degree. I did not have the patience for 20-hour days on sets, making pointless movies with my colleagues, and I caught the politics bug and I instead finished my political science degree, and that was good for everyone else who was enrolled in the film degree at Curtin University, and it was good for me. But the control that students have over their data that's held in this system is important. It's important that they know when their transcripts are accessed. It's important they have control over what level of data is available to others. It's important that they are also educated on how that data is provided, what they can do, how they can easily log in. We know that now, I know the member for Tangney wants my credit card number and everything that comes with it. You won't be able to buy much with it, member for Tangney, so I don't know it's going to be as exciting as you'd think. Definitely won't fit out the Applecross Tennis Club. But it is important that people feel a sense of security over that data and easy access. We've all got MyGov accounts, we've all got access to Medicare online and everything else, but being able to get in and easily, maybe 10, 15 years after you've been enrolled in a vocational education and training course, being able to get in and make sure you still have control over that data is important. And make sure that data is secure. It is reasonable that people are concerned about the security of data that government holds about something that is important to them, like their education. I also think it's important that we recognise that while this is a very small step, it is a small investment in our vocational education and training sector. I'm not a believer that we need small investment to keep that sector strong. I think we need huge investment to keep that sector strong. I'll take the opportunity to commend the McGowan government in Western Australia on their investments to cut the fees for TAFE courses for some 34 target priority qualifications. Aged care, disability services, defence, hospitality and tourism, making it more affordable for Western Australians of any age to go and get the qualifications they need to succeed into the future. Some of these fees had gotten ridiculously out of hand, and what we do see across this nation is a dispersed range of TAFE fees, whether you go to Victoria, Queensland, Western Australia, New South Wales. The fees are not consistent, and that might eventually, over time, if we don't do something nationally to bring those fees more into line, lead to some states paying for the training of people and other states saying, oh, they've got a lot of trained plumbers, we might go and grab them and bring them across the border. It's important that all states invest in TAFE, and it's important that the federal government leads on TAFE. Of course, the Coalition's form is a $3 billion cut from the TAFE and training budget since they came to office. We now have 150,000 fewer apprentices and trainees than we did when this government came to office. And there are more people dropping out of apprenticeships and traineeships than there are finishing those apprenticeships or traineeships. But we have this huge disconnect. At the same time, there's 1.9 million Australians who are unemployed or looking for more work. That's huge lost capacity in our economy, and vocational education and training is the glue that will connect those people to jobs that fit their skills, fit their interests, take advantage of their natural drive. These are people who are saying, 1.9 million Australians, Deputy Speaker, saying they want to do more work, and the economy is not working for them. The vocational education and training system is not working for them. And look, I'm going to break it to them now. The unique student identifier, it probably is not going to do it for them either. So we do need to see something to address that lost capacity in our economy. We do need to make sure that we have more students enrolling, more students completing their vocational education and training, because it's also what businesses tell us day in, day out. They want more trained staff. They want more young Australians who come in with the right qualifications from a reputable training institution, ready to do the job and ready to learn more, because we all know you do learn stuff on the job, but you need to have really good foundation. TAFE, vocational education and training, gives people that foundation. And I thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.